Welcome back, Weirdos and Weeaboos, to the channel Debushin Doge, where today I'm doing something just a little bit different. Today we're covering a little indie game called Ghostly Acres, but for a reason you might not see coming, because I didn't see it coming. This video actually marks the first time that I've had the developers of the game actually approach me and ask to play their game and make a video about it. And for full transparency, obviously that's what I'm doing. It's not something I've been paid to do, although they did say they will give me a Steam key for the game when it fully releases in early November, as right now we're playing a free demo. Other than that though, this is still obviously going to be purely my own opinion, just want to be transparent about things. I'm going to have good things to say about the game, but I'm also going to be critical. And in fact, I can start right off the bat by just saying, if I want to be brutally honest right now, my first gut feeling was this is a cool opportunity, but I'm not sure if this is a good idea at first. Mostly just because I was thinking, well, the game's fine, I don't have a problem with it, it's nice. But at first I thought to myself, I don't know if I really have that much to say about it. I don't really know if I could make a video on it. But for one, I should probably take the opportunity, considering that I've been in a bit of a creative rut recently with this stuff. And for two, I actually warmed up to the idea mostly because, and I know it's not the only time I've said this, but I need to keep reminding myself, oh my god, the amount of times I think, no, I need to wait until I have enough to say about this thing to make a video on it. And then I make a video on it, and it's like 2 hours long. And I don't think it's going to be 2 hours long, but it's 2 hours long. So there's loads of times I will tell myself, yeah, no, I don't have enough to say about this. I don't even know I should bother making a video about it. Will I even have enough to fill 10 minutes? And then that video that I'm concerned will not even have 10 minutes of content will end up being, at the very least, like 25 minutes, which is more than long enough. With all that said, intro spiel aside, how does the game actually work? This game is a little bit difficult to categorize in terms of genre. In fairness, I think at least the general outline of its mechanics should be pretty intuitive just from watching. I will explain in depth later, just so you know the specifics, but the general idea I'm sure you're already getting just by watching. It was pitched to me as a sort of idle hotel management game, and I kind of get why they gave it that label. Definitely the progression of the game, the aspects of sort of having a repeating cycle you go through to generate resources, and then slowly you use those resources to add new parts to the cycle that make it more complex, so you can make even more rewards to get more resources to buy the next thing. It very much is reminiscent of idle games, of course. But in fairness, while I get what they're going for here, I actually think idle isn't a great way to describe the way this game plays. And that's because, unlike most idle games, this game requires a lot of active management and participation. If you AFK this game for like a minute, give or take, things will start to break down. And in fairness, it's not like it'll be irreversible damage, but it will be things that slow your resource generation down to a crawl until eventually you're getting nothing if you don't pay attention for just a little too long. Just to be clear, that's not really a critique, it's just a description. In fairness, in most cases though, I will admit, I'm not a big fan of this approach. However, I do actually think it works here because this game leans in an almost more puzzle-like direction, which makes the active management of it a bit more entertaining than it would be for many other idle games. Despite the fact that it does require your attention, it's also still a cozy enough, slow-paced enough game that's the kind of thing you can very easily play while listening to a podcast or watching a YouTube video in the background. With all that said, let's start getting into the actual specifics of how this game works. The object is pretty simple: make enough money to pay off your mortgage. Other than money though, you'll also have to worry about gems to buy certain things, and also Ectoplasm to unlock permanent upgrades in the second tab menu. Though that is something that isn't immediately available, it's something you have to raise enough money to be able to buy and unlock. How do you make money? Well, believe it or not, it's not actually by having the ghosts that inhabit this hotel come visit. At least not directly. If they just come and sleep in a bed, you do get Ectoplasm for it, but you don't get money. However, anytime someone comes to stay at the hotel, they will at some point wake up and walk around and see if there's any facilities. Anything they walk into, they're going to use, and that will usually make you money. Now, to run this hotel, you're going to be relying on two very important people. Flip the Ghost, who will build all the facilities you need, and Mel, who's going to run around doing all the cleaning, money collecting, and clearing out of new areas of the hotel whenever you can afford to do so. Anytime you want to do any of these things, you have to wait for Mel or Flip to be able to get there and do the job. This doesn't pose much of an issue to start, but as you might be able to imagine, this becomes a big issue later. That is because, as much as we may love this dynamic duo, it also can't be denied that, oh my god, they're so fucking slow. It takes them forever to do anything once you get to the late game, and that will be one of the biggest bottlenecks you're going to run into. So you got to make sure to plan around that and do what you can to mitigate the damage from it. All that being said, for the here and now, they won't have as much on their plate when the hotel is nice and small. The first thing you're probably going to be looking to do is to build some beds, and those all belong to the first row of buildings. Small beds are completely free to build and give 1 ectoplasm when they are done being used. Although for whatever reason, don't ask me why, couldn't explain it to you, every single bed in this game, when you are done cleaning it, once everyone's done using it, you send Mel to clean it, and it just disappears. I don't know why you'd bother to clean a disappearing bed that doesn't stick around when you're done, but sure, whatever. Basically, this means for every single one guest who visits the place, you're going to need to build them a bed using Flip, and then also clean out the bed using Mel, which is going to take up their time. At the very least, it doesn't take up your money because of the fact that the beds are free, at least to start. If you're building bigger beds though, they will start to cost money, even if not a lot. Once you've built enough small beds, you'll unlock queen-size beds, which allow the ghost to visit more facilities and stay for longer, as well as grant 3 ectoplasm when they're done instead of 1, and eventually king-size beds in the late game, where they will visit even more facilities, stay for even longer, and grant 5 ectoplasm. Now when I say they leave the bed to look at other facilities, they have a very specific path. And truth be told, for nearly the first hour of me playing the game, it turned out I was playing it the stupid way. You see, I was a bit confused by this whole arrow thing when you're placing beds. But obviously I pretty quickly figured out, oh, that's the direction the ghosts go after they leave the bed. Okay. And to be honest, once I realized that I was kind of confused by at least the specifics, again, I got the basics of the game straight away, but there was like little things, I'm like, wait, how does this work? Wait, what does this do? I eventually realized that my first attempt was a train wreck, and it was probably best to just keep it a train wreck and just use it as a testing grounds for everything that I wasn't sure about. How does this work? How does that work? It took me a while to figure out what makes the ghosts decide they're done visiting facilities and what makes them decide where they're gonna go. I mean, I could tell they would walk to the left, but sometimes they would just give up instantly without ever interacting with anything, and sometimes they would interact with a bunch of things before finally going back. Now I'll admit, maybe this is a reading problem on my part. I didn't realize this is what it meant when the bed says that they can visit 2 items. Essentially, the ghosts are supposed to leave the bed, walk to the left, and keep walking until they have visited 2 facilities, at least with the small bed. Now, of course, that number increases for bigger beds, but we're just keeping it to small beds for now for the example. However, if they have to walk over an empty space, that doesn't take things up. So even if the ghosts have to walk to the other side of the hotel, they will keep walking until they've seen 2 items. The main thing that confused me is it seems that if a ghost walks from one bed and bumps into another bed, they just immediately stop. I'm not exactly sure why, but this was the main thing that kind of threw me off. But now that I understand that's how it works, it's pretty intuitive. Although I will say there is one other thing. While it didn't take me long to figure out that the reason it was giving me this arrow thing when I was placing the beds is that's the way the ghosts are going to walk when they wake up, what did take me a lot longer is to find out I was playing the game the stupid way the entire time. You see, I thought the beds could only go left. It turns out, when I actually took a second to pause and read all the controls, there's a control that says you can actually use the scroll wheel or the mouse keys while placing a bed to change the direction the ghosts leave the bed from. This was a game changer that made me immediately want to restart and completely rethink my approach. And that's also when I actually started recording some gameplay. Now, we haven't really gotten to the Ectoplasm menu where you can get those permanent upgrades, but I will spoil you a little and say one of the permanent upgrades is to be able to add to the amount of facilities that all beds allow all ghosts to visit. So it'll take that 2 things that a small bed would allow them to visit and make it 3, and eventually 4 and 5 at max level for a small bed. The reason I'm giving the game away here a little bit early is I just can't help but fire off a criticism already, even if this is maybe a little bit early in the video to be doing it. It is always possible I am simply misunderstanding the game, but I must say I do not get the point of bigger beds. As I say, the bigger beds actually cost money, whereas the small beds are free in this game. And it seems obvious at first. You get more ectoplasm from the bigger beds and they visit more things, so you make more money. Isn't that good? But here's the thing, right? You have limited space in this game that's very expensive to unlock. And then as well as that, even once you have all the space in the game, by that point you probably have all the bed upgrades. And a fully upgraded small bed actually allows a ghost to visit 5 different items before they're done. That is a lot just for a small bed. Even a queen size bed, while I used a little bit of queen size beds, isn't all that useful, I would say, considering that it ups it from 5 to 8. Which is something, don't get me wrong, but 8 is also such a big number it's hard to make good use out of. The most facilities that a ghost can physically visit before they simply hit the wall is 9. And even then, if you have the whole hotel unlocked at this point, it's more efficient to have beds at both sides of the wall, knocking it down to 8. So that just means the king-size beds are kinda useless as far as I can tell, because if you already have the queen-size beds fully upgraded, they're so big that they will cover basically the entire map. And king-size beds overshoot it, covering so much space that you physically can't actually use it. Maybe the whole staying longer thing is what makes it worth it. I must admit, I don't have a great measurement on exactly what the value of that is. But to me, it just seems like the best strategy is to spam a bunch of small beds and maybe a couple queen-size beds on extremely long stretches, but for the most part, you don't even touch the king-size beds. I thought at the very least it might be smart to go for bigger beds to get more ectoplasm faster, and that might be true, but because they stay longer, it takes longer to get to the ectoplasm. So I could be wrong here, but I get the feeling that it makes ectoplasm about the same speed. Now, this is a big asterisk that's going to be on a lot of my points, but this very much could just be a demo issue. Perhaps this isn't the biggest the hotels will get. If you have hotels later in the game that are huge and cover a stupid amount of space, maybe at that point you would need the king-size beds. Or maybe there is some hidden mechanic to these things I'm not fully understanding. But for now, I do feel like the new beds I was unlocking were often worse than the small beds I was starting with, considering they were getting the job done while being free and the big beds were not free. So now we've covered beds, let's cover food and drink. The second row of facilities is completely consumed by drinks machines, starting with water coolers, which don't make a lot of money but are free to build, and eventually moving up to coffee machines, which cost a bit more and make a bit more, and of course soda machines, which cost even more and yet make even more money as well. Drinks machines tend to make a modest amount of money with no strings attached. On the other hand, the next row is filled with food facilities, which will make more money but with a drawback. Not only are there no free food facilities, the fruit bowl, the cheapest one, still costs money, unlike the water cooler, but on top of that, any food facilities will create waste. And if there isn't a bin in the hotel for the ghosts to throw their waste into, they will just throw trash on the floor. How this translates to gameplay is if there are any free areas in your hotel, then they will clutter them with trash, which then Mel has to go clean up if you want to actually use that square for anything. To be honest, I thought there might have been some other catch here, because to me that seemed at first to be a very forgiving downside. In fact, I didn't even see why you needed bins at all. I played along with it at first, but eventually I was like, why am I bothering with these things? If I just fill the whole hotel, which I want to do anyway to be the most efficient usage of my space anyway, then there's nowhere for the trash to go. Surely the game has to do something to punish me for that, and eventually I realized, no, it doesn't. The only thing it will do is if a space does become available, it will of course put all the backlog trash on that space, which will be a lot to clean up. But in theory, if you do keep the entire hotel packed at all times, the trash never becomes a problem in the first place. So you don't actually need bins, which seems strange. Though in fairness, once I started pushing this theory to its limits, I started to see why this mechanic worked the way it does. In fairness, in the early game, you can actually kind of get away with it. A lot of the times you don't really mind just having to occasionally clear out some trash every now and then to save yourself some gems and space so you can make more money. The problem in the late game though is the fact that, well, no matter how hard you try, you're constantly placing beds. They're constantly disappearing and being replaced. And if there's even a split second where a bed disappears and a new one isn't immediately replacing it, the massive backlog of trash is going to come pouring into that single square and massively delay your ability to build anything new. No matter how hard you try, there will always be a gap that will appear somewhere in your hotel. And as long as there is even a 1 block gap, there is a space for all that backlog trash to pour into. And that's going to massively slow down and gum up the works. So sure enough, you do actually have to engage with trash as a mechanic. Another thing I'd like to just quickly mention as well, just as a slight critique, to me, I feel like it could have been made a bit clearer that the trash bins don't have to be anywhere near the ghosts. Considering that the way the game typically works in most cases is that the ghosts actually have to actively walk to a facility to use it, for quite a while when I first picked the game up, I assumed that I had to place a bin in the ghost's path for them to use it. And that of course led to me missing out on a lot of income, until I eventually found out you can literally place the bin on the other side of the hotel and it will just suck it up from like the alternate reality the ghost is actually in. So yeah, basically where you place your bins doesn't matter, which is good to know, but maybe could have been made just a little bit clearer. Because already I've had a few moments where I've been skeptical bins are even worth making. As I've said, it only gave me all the more reason to think they were underwhelming back when I thought you actually had to put them in the path of ghosts and give up income just to use them. Moving on to the fourth row, it's a bit of a miscellaneous hodgepodge of different items. And, well, you've kind of actually already gotten a sense of this because of the fact that we've actually already said something that's in the fourth row. The bin is in the fourth row. I said earlier that bins could be considered a waste of gems, and that's because they are probably your first buildable that will cost gems. They're completely free in terms of money, but they do cost 3 gems to place. And so the first slot we skipped over in the fourth row actually belongs to the only way you'll be able to generate gems, the safe. If a ghost walks up to one, you will get 1 gem. So gem generation is slow, but in fairness, of course, not that much in this game requires gems, and gems are, of course, less plentiful than money in general. Lastly, in the fourth row, you get the auto collector, one of the weirdest facilities you have on hand. I'll be completely honest, I didn't give this one all too much of a chance. I placed it just for the sake of having it down and having tried everything, but I'm a little bit skeptical about how useful this one is. It costs 800 money, so it's pretty damn expensive, even though in fairness you'll get this pretty late, so you'll definitely have that money by then. But still, all it does is any facilities that are directly above, below, to the left or to the right of it, it will collect money from automatically, without Mel having to run around and collect the money for you. That might sound useful. However, collecting money is faster than just about any other task that Mel can do. So while it still does take up time just for all the running around, for the most part, collecting money is not a big obstacle. I'm a little skeptical it's really worth it. You could just have more money-making facilities in the first place, rather than spending a lot of money on building something that doesn't technically make you any money, it just automatically collects money from a maximum of 4 other things if placed perfectly. Even when placed perfectly, it's probably going to be in the path of a ghost, and so it's probably going to be a wasted facility that's going to make that ghost make you less money. Again, always a chance I'm missing something here, but it does seem to me this building is kind of not very good. But I could always be completely wrong. Of course, I didn't get to use it until the late game of this winning run that you're seeing on the screen right now, so I didn't really get the chance to properly test it out much. But it didn't really seem very great to me, to be honest. Either way, if you want to know a real good use for your gems, that's when you would look to the fifth row. The fifth row of buildings is all about multiplying your income. And so as you can imagine, these buildings when used properly are often the single biggest money makers and gem makers in the game. However, they are also very expensive in both money and gems. To start out, you'll get the newsstand, which will double the money of the last thing the ghost visited. Then you can get the TV, which doubles gems instead. And finally, you can get the arcade machine, which triples money rather than doubling it. You gotta be careful though, because of course the ghosts have to have visited something that made money before visiting these if you want a payout. And so sometimes it can be a little difficult formatting your sort of hotel in a way that the multiple ways that the guests walk through the facilities still always visit some form of money-making item before they visit a multiplier. Come to think of it, I really should have tested this. I just realized I don't know if this like stacks. But either way, these are definitely much more useful facilities in my view. That's basically everything the game has to offer, because there's only one more thing to cover, and that is of course the Ectoplasm menu. You need to get a little bit of money to unlock it in the first place and start using that Ectoplasm, but it's really not a lot. Once you get past the very early game, you'll unlock this menu and be able to start using it. There are 5 upgrades available, each with 3 tiers that get exponentially more expensive. And I'm going to be real with you, I have mixed opinions on this menu. I think it starts off strong with the first sets of upgrades being speed upgrades for Flip and Mel, so they can build, move around, clean, and collect money faster. These are by far the most useful upgrades available in this menu. The other 3 are a bit more weird. Let's start out with the one that I at least think is the best, one that I think I already referred to as well, and that is there is an upgrade which makes it so that each bed allows the ghost to visit more facilities before they're finished. And not only is this the cheapest upgrade to get initially, but I would also say that while it drops off hard in the late game, it is the best upgrade in the game at the early game. It is huge to get early game and jump from 2 items per visit to 3 on small beds. That is a massive jump. It's just that as you get further into the game, it doesn't become quite so big a deal because you very quickly start running out of space anyway to use all this stuff. And even when you have all the space, usually by that point, you're starting to unlock better beds you could be using anyway. And I know that I critique the bigger beds, but again, it's mostly the king-size bed. The queen-size bed, I think, has its place, although I still think the small beds just generally seem a little better in most cases. But yeah, you get the point. I think the bed size upgrade is good. It's just got a little bit of a problem being very front-loaded, where it's stupid good at first, and then it kind of becomes and then it kind of becomes I don't really care by the end of the game. The main ones I kind of have an issue with are the last two upgrades. There's an upgrade that simply increases the capacity of all bins by 1, and an upgrade that simply increases the gems produced by safes by 1. I'm going to start with the bins just because I think that's the slightly better one of the two, but even still, I think this one's a little weak. At the very least, you do hit a point relatively quickly in fairness where the ghosts are making a lot of mess, and it's definitely a waste of space to have too many bins on the map, and you don't want to have trash completely flooding the place, so it is somewhat important to increase the capacity of them. But I don't know, it does feel a little bit weird that there's no better version of the bin, or no way to upgrade your bin, at least money-wise, it has to be done through this menu. And it does just seem like increasing the capacity of bins is just not a very interesting effect. Maybe I'm being a bit pedantic here, but I just feel like usually these upgrades menus that are separate from the main sort of building menus and take a special resource in games like this tend to have more interesting, sort of big, impactful effects. And it does feel like just increasing the capacity of your bins by 1 feels more like a paid upgrade in money than a special upgrade in Ectoplasm, if you know what I mean. But in fairness, you know, it gets its use. The one I have the biggest issue with is the safe upgrade, although it might be less to do with the upgrade itself or even safes themselves, and more to do with gems, at least in the demo version of the game we've got to play. Again, this could very much be a thing that is not an issue in the full game, but gems are kind of awkward in this game. You see, almost everything that costs gems is the kind of thing that you're going to build once and then probably never need to build again. Combine that with the fact there isn't really a lot that actually costs gems. And it makes it so that yes, while gaining gems might take a while, it doesn't really seem very worth it to me to buy these safe upgrades. Because sure, at first it feels painfully slow getting gems when you're only getting 1 gem per safe visit and you need 20 to get a single newsstand. But then once you've built the newsstand, you built the newsstand. And once again, there's only so much space to work with, so even as you expand, there's only so many newsstands you're going to need to buy. Eventually, you're going to hit a point where you're not going to build any more TVs, any more newsstands, or any more arcade machines, and at that point, gems are actually literally worthless to you. For that reason, this upgrade is useless in the late game, and even in the early game, like, it's useful if you're impatient, I guess. It's nice that to start, going from 1 gem per visit to 2, while it doesn't sound like a lot, is literally twice as effective. It's actually a pretty big jump, I'll give you that. But it just feels like it's only really useful if you're impatient in the early game. In the long run, it does feel like upgrading safes should be minimum priority, because it just seems like you don't get a lot off of it. Maybe if there was some sort of consumable item that was really valuable that required gems, this would feel a lot better. And who knows, maybe there will be later in the game. Though for now, obviously, I can't really say that. Another thing I feel a little bit mean having to critique, because it's definitely going to be a demo exclusive issue, but it was a little bit annoying, is I completely understand that the 3rd and 4th menus are locked out of the demo because of course they don't want to give everything away in the free demo, but it would have at least been nice to have some sort of heads up or warning that when you buy the 3rd menu, it's just going to be blank and say, hey, by the way, this is a demo, you don't get to use it. Because yeah, on my first run through the game, I spent a while saving up 25,000 in cash to buy that new menu instead of expanding my hotel, only to see that that menu just said, hey, by the way, get the full game. Now, in the defense of the developers to some extent, I understand why it works this way, because you actually have to buy all the menus before the option to pay your mortgage comes up. So obviously that's why you still have to buy menus that don't even exist in the demo. But at the very least, it would be nice if we got some kind of warning. Hey, by the way, you're just doing this to like get to your mortgage payoff. You're not actually going to be rewarded with a new feature or anything for buying this menu. In fairness, that would be like a demo exclusive feature. Obviously, in the full game, you would actually get a menu for it. And of course, demos often, you know, they're not top priority. The main game is the real priority, the main thing you want to get right. So, for the most part, that's Ghostly Acres. Although I will mention one last thing just before we close. I was told when I was introduced to the game by the developers that while it is a game you can play at your own pace, it's a game they feel is best experienced when you are essentially trying to speedrun. A sentiment I would generally agree with. I can see why they were saying that. It's a game that is obviously not trying to be super difficult, but that does mean it can very easily get boring if you're just trying to get from A to B and not particularly in a hurry. It really only gets challenging or interesting if you're trying to do it quickly. And I see potential here, but I do feel like that's kind of the point I have to conclude on here. Potential. I think it's a decent concept. I could see how the gameplay loop could very much be fleshed out, and it very much could become something very interesting and intricate to speedrun. But to be completely honest, I don't feel like I was feeling much more than just a tiny taster of that in the demo. Again, can't complain too much, it's a demo, it's kind of the point. But if I'm gonna be direct, I will admit, I had a lot of moments where I'm like, I could see how this could get really exciting or really complicated, or doing this to the best of its ability could actually get really investing. But right now, I'm not feeling super sucked in. I'm feeling intrigued. I don't know if I'm sucked in yet. So no promises, but I feel like there's a decent chance I might be covering this game again when it actually releases in early November, because then I can probably judge it on its merits a lot more fairly and tell you if I think it really is a compelling experience trying to speedrun and play it quickly. But just before I close off this video, I should leave you with a little bit of a challenge. You see, because I was told that this game is often best experienced when speedran, while I didn't go all cylinders firing, I did try to get a decent time to complete the game in. And I ended up finishing the game in 1 hour and 26 minutes. And at first, when I managed to complete the game and got a bunch of achievements, including an achievement specifically for beating the game quickly, I thought I must have gotten a really good time. And to be fair, I think I still got a good time, but then I did see there's another achievement for beating the game in under an hour, which clearly I was quite a bit off of. So clearly there's still a lot of room for optimization. But hey, gives you guys a challenge to do. If you follow the link that I will totally remember to put in the pinned comment and description to the Steam page of the game, and play the demo, or play the full version when it comes out, you can see if you can beat my time of 1 hour and 26 minutes. With all that said, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Oh yeah, and have a spooky Halloween. This was the Halloween special. This was very special, a very unique video specifically for Halloween. Definitely not something I was going to do anyway that happens to be mildly Halloween-y. Alright, have a nice evening. Bye.